Welcome to the Folktale Project. This is Dan Scholes. This week we're continuing with the story of Ourson, the French fairy tale. And for those of you who have been with us the whole time, we're at part 10. For those of you just joining in, I would highly recommend going back a few weeks and starting at the beginning. This is a long tale, and it is so worth the ride. Last we left, Ourson and Violet and Passerose and Agnella had lost nearly everything in a fire, including nearly Ourson. But he has been discovered. However, Agnella has lost the magic ring that came from the fairy Drolette that provided them with everything that they needed. And so, Ourson has set off in search of work. This is the farm, the castle, the forge. Ourson walked more than 3 hours before he arrived at a large and beautiful farm, where he hoped to obtain employment. He saw from a distance the farmer and his family seated before his front door taking their evening meal. He was but a short way off when one of the children, a little boy about 10 years of age, perceived him. He sprang from his seat, uttered a cry of terror, and fled into the house. A second child, a little girl 8 years old, hearing the cry of her brother, turned towards Ourson and commenced the most piercing shrieks. All the family now followed the movement of the children and turned around. At the sight of Ourson, the women cried out with terror, and the children fled in wild alarm. The men seized sticks and pitchforks, expecting to be attacked by poor Ourson, whom they took for some extraordinary animal escaped from a menagerie. Ourson, seeing this movement of terror and preparation for attack, spoke to them, hoping to dissipate their fears. "I'm not a bear, as you seem to suppose, but a poor boy seeking work, and who would be very glad if you should give him employment." The farmer was greatly amazed to hear a bear speak. He did not know whether to fly or to interrogate him further. He resolved, however, to speak. "Who are you from? Whence do you come?" "I come from the woodland farm, and I am the son of Agnella," Ourson replied. "Ah, then it was you who in your childhood went with your mother to market and frightened all of our children to death. You have lived in the woods and done without our help. Why do you seek us now? Go away and live as you have lived heretofore." "Our farmhouse is burned to the ground. I have to work now with my hands to support my mother and sister. For this reason, I pray you to give me work. I will do all you command me." "Do you suppose, boy, that I will take into my service a villainous animal like you, who will frighten my wife and my servants to death and throw my children into convulsions? I'm not quite such a fool, my boy, not quite such a fool. Enough of this. Be off. Allow us to finish our dinner." "Master Farmer, be merciful. Only try my work. Place me altogether by myself. Then no one will fear me. I will conceal myself so well that your children will not see me." "Will you be done talking, wicked bear? Go instantly. If you don't, you shall feel the teeth of my pitchfork." Ourson bowed his head. Tears of humiliation and disappointment glittered in his eyes. He withdrew slowly, followed by the coarse laugh and shouts of the farmhands. When out of sight, he no longer restrained his tears, but in all his shame and despair, the thought that Violet could take upon herself this ugly covering did not enter his thoughts. Ourson walked on till he came in sight of a castle, where he saw a crowd of men coming, going, and laboring at every kind of work. Some were mowing, some raking, some currying horses, some sweeping, some watering plants, some sewing. "Here is a house where I shall certainly find work," said Ourson to himself. "I see neither women nor children, and I think the men will not be afraid of me." Ourson drew near without being seen. He took off his hat and stood before a man who seemed to be the superintendent. "Sir," said he. The man looked up, recoiled a step when he saw Ourson, and examined him with the greatest surprise. "Who are you? What do you want?" said he, in a rude voice. Sir, I am the son of Agnella, mistress of the woodland farm. Well, and what has brought you here? Our house is burned down, sir. I am seeking work in order to support my mother and sister. I hope you will be good enough to give me employment. Give employment to a bear? Sir, I have only the appearance of a bear. Under this rough outside, which is so repugnant to you, there beats a human heart, a heart capable of gratitude and affection. You shall have no reason to complain either of my work or of my goodwill. Whilst Ourson spoke, and the superintendent listened with a mocking air, a great noise was heard among the horses. They began to kick and prance, and the grooms could scarcely hold them. Some of them indeed escaped and fled in terror to the woods. "It is the bear! It is the bear!" cried the grooms. "It has terrified the horses. Drive it off! Chase it away! We cannot control our horses." "Off with you!" cried the superintendent. Ourson was stupefied by his misfortunes and was immovable. "Ha! You will not go?" vociferated the man. "Wait a few moments, you hairy beast. I will give you something to run for. Hullo, men! Bring out the dogs and set them upon this animal. Hurry! See him scampering off." In fact, Ourson, more dead than alive at this cruel treatment, precipitately withdrew from the presence of these wicked and inhuman men. This second attempt had failed utterly, but he would not allow himself to be discouraged. "It is still 3 or 4 hours before sunset, so I have time to continue my search for work." He directed his steps towards a forge, which was some distance from the woodland farm. The master of the forge employed a great many workmen. He gave work to those who asked it, not in charity, but in view of his own interest. He was feared, but he was not loved. He developed the riches of the country, but no one thanked him for it, because he alone profited by it. By his avidity and his opulence, he ground down the poor workmen who could find only employment with this new Marquis of Carabas. Poor Ourson arrived at the forge. The master was at the door, scolding some, threatening others, and terrifying all. "Sir," said Ourson, drawing near, "have you any work to give me?" "Certainly. What kind of work?" He raised his head at these words, for he had replied without looking at Ourson. When his eye fell upon him, he did not finish his phrase. His eyes flashed with rage, and he stammered out, What foolery is this? Are we in the midst of the carnival, that a workman ventures upon such a ridiculous masquerade? Throw off your ugly bearskin instantly, or I'll crisp your bristles for you in my fire." "Sir, this is no masquerade," replied Ourson sadly. "It is, alas, my natural skin, but if you will be humane enough to employ me, you will see that my strength is equal to my goodwill." "I give work to you, you vile animal!" cried the master of the forge, foaming with rage. "I will put you into a sack and send you to a menagerie, or I will throw you into a den with your brother bears. You will have work enough to defend yourself from their claws. Be off!" And brandishing his club, he would have dealt Ourson a heavy blow, if the poor boy had not made a hasty retreat. And that is the farm, the castle, and the forge, where Ourson has, looked for work and found none, because of his curse, the curse of the Fairy Furious. And here we have what could be a bit of a cameo in our last potential employer for Ourson. For is it not the Marquis of Carabas who is the protagonist of Puss in Boots? This is Dan Schulz for the Folktale Project. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Overcast, anywhere you like to get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Folktale Project. You can find us on Auto Radio, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, anywhere you like to listen. And you can always head over to folktaleproject.com, where you'll find a new story waiting for you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'd also like to take a moment to welcome our 3 new patrons, Manuel Gonzalez, Ann Harvey, and Ryan Keenan. Thank you all so much. And to anyone else who would like to help support the podcast, head over to patreon.com/folktaleproject, where for as little as $1 a month, you get early access to all of the stories and I thank you. As always, thank you all so much for listening.